And staff in the room? Are we?
Don't be cheeky.
In the 80s, that would have been something very different.
Good morning, councillors and staff in the room. Welcome. And to those members of the community observing, welcome to our big day of looking at governance, the council LTP workshop, the activity planning. Councillor Stewart will be joining us online, and there are apologies from Councillor Crackett and Councillor Toe McNaughton. All right, Edina, thank you.
Okay, so today's activities that we're focusing on this morning cover the governance, planning and reporting and corporate services areas. So we're predominantly, other than governance and planning and reporting, these are what we would normally consider to be the back office functions, the more corporate functions. So we have got public presentations this morning. Then after lunch, we are in public excluded, which includes some of our external grant requests will be coming in this afternoon. Those times are fixed. It is likely that this morning we could well go ahead of time if it's any of our workshops to date are similar. Now, just a reminder, this is the each business owner coming through telling you what their activity is delivering, what they need to improve their level of service. And it's the opportunity for you to ask them questions about the levels of service you want out of their activities. And it gives them direction as they write their activity plans, which will come back for approval later in the year as we put the final parts of the long-term plan together. Dana, have you got anything else you want to add?
No, just actually just a wee note on the activities that we will go through today. You'll notice that there's some new names on that list there. So most of those activities in the morning, they were previously covered under corporate services, regulatory services, and democratic process, but some of them have been split out a bit more now. Thank you.
And that split out's the result of the latest guidance that we've got from the Ministry of Cities, Environment, Regions and Transport, which is still under consultation, so they could still change again, or that by the time we do an LTP. They are consulting at the same time as we're preparing, so we're building the aeroplane as we're flying it.
Sorry. Chair, I just have a conflict of interest with the Active Southland one. So are you comfortable that I sit in the room? Obviously, this is not a decision-making meeting, but I won't ask any questions, but I can leave the room if that makes sense.
So what kind of conflict?
I'm on the Board of Trustees of Active Southland.
Right, so I think probably it was better if you weren't here.
That's okay.
That's right.
Happy for that.
Thanks. You can go and have a coffee break.
So we'll start with the first one, which is the governance activity.
Kia ora. So, I am merely a conduit. These words are from Michael Morris. So, he's just outlining that the more meetings you have, the extra workload it creates. There is complexity with Lagoima requests that we are accountable for. There are challenges meeting the public expectations against budgets. So just in terms of translators or events that we hold, just the cost to serve there, and compliance requirements. So there are many changes from central government that we aim to adhere to. Levels of service, so that just gives you indicating what we're actually looking after in the governance area. But you've got these slides as well, haven't you? So I won't dilly-dally. So one of the things he would like to propose is that we consider recording public excluded sections of the meeting so that it can form part of the official public record of the meeting. and also move to non-narrative minutes. What that means is we're recording the resolution that you decide upon, but not all the talk in between of how you got there, because we have them recorded. This creates an efficiency and reduces the workload on staff. It also means as a chair of a meeting, when you get minutes to have a look at, it records the decision. How you got there is held on the YouTube recording, and other councils in New Zealand, my understanding is they actually can link that into the minutes so that it's got a magic button that you can press. Listen to this old person talking. That our comms team would have them embedded so that you could watch back the recording. Obviously not PX until it become a time when it could be watched back, if it can. And in a recent survey, so Michael's got some data there, the majority of councils are recording their PX sections.
Any discussion? Grant?
Why are we using AI?
Why are we
Record the
using?
meetings
We
and to make
Yeah,
the
we
notes.
could. We're actually, just so you're aware, we are doing some testing with a product that one of our senior members, hashtag the chief executive, is trialling at the minute. And so if that passes the test and actually does produce, because you've still got to have a human check it to make sure it's accurate, and whether it can understand, it's got to understand our accents and also make sure that, but then you're not going to, narrative minutes may be a thing of the past, but just flagging that to create efficiency.
Any other comments? Oh, Mayor?
If we record these, since it's been done elsewhere, I assume they're not reclaimable. We're talking about public excluded meetings. We're making videos of them, basically. Are they secure as notes would be in that sense? And that
They're held in our same systems with our same firewalls and safeguards and within our cybersecurity of our whole of network. So just like it would be today, if we did have a threat act to get through, we can never 100% guarantee 100% of the time everything is that we're not going to have something happen. But effectively, they're held within the same place they would be now.
But I'm not sure you answered the first part of the question. I'm assuming that the video would not be legitimable given it's in PX.
It depends on the nature of the meeting, because some things can be released after a time. So, for example, if it was a commercially sensitive matter, but then later on, actually, we could release all the information related to the decision, you could actually have that recording go forward.
Councillor Dermody?
Yeah, I know, sorry. In terms of the Head Start process, I think they've requested sort of any changes you'd recommend to the system. Is there anything in here we could put in a Head Start to get changed around any aspect of governance at a high level, the process around Lagoimas as an example, not saying it's...
In terms,
taking that opportunity probably.
we hadn't really touched on that in terms of a team and for the local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, 1987, we hadn't flagged it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think the public and the community and all of us in the room want to see a transparent process.
Yeah.
But
is it simply just flagging that would need to be reviewed? Because if you think about that, under either a 1 or 2 model, there's going to be significantly more, and local boards are stood up, there's going to be a lot more requirement on governance to deliver some of those functions to those community boards, isn't there? So it's not going to get easier, it's probably going to get larger. So are we looking to sort of whittle off things that, so it becomes core to governance, or equally as the changes, and the minister's said this 2 or 3 times, if there's something in there, it may simply be about noting, hey, we believe this 1987 Act, or whatever it is, should be reviewed in accordance with the restructure of local government.
that's a really good point, Councillor, and I will take that up with staff who are closer to it. Oh no, Chief Executive's got something.
Just in line with that discussion, I'd also like to add that whether it's one or two, from an entity's perspective, it's also the right time for you to consider what you talked about before with the introduction and utilisation of advanced tool sets to support future meetings components, and that's something that will need to be considered alongside. So that's the right time when you start looking at what the legislation in 1987 probably didn't really take into account the technology changes that we've got today. So that would need a refresh and a re-look alongside the two of them. So that's when I think the timing would need to be done.
Yeah, and look, I think to sign it off, I think the risk we have with any Head Start proposal is we assume that someone in central government has thought about it or thinks or knows, and the actual fact is it's proven numerous times they haven't got an idea. And so, I don't want us to dig in deeply. I just think we need to flag any legislative things that needs to be reviewed, because that gives us the opportunity to then go back if whatever comes out of it and say, well, let's be the leaders in this stuff to get a real change. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It's all right, you've made your point. Anybody else? Thank you, Trudy.
There's your measuring performance. So we did have very low voter turnout this last election, which was really disappointing. And again, in terms of our Lagoimas turned around, we're sitting at 100% within the timeframes is our measure. That's not me, that's Rhiannon.
That's a question, Chair, about that measuring performance.
Yes, Susan?
Question about measuring performance. So, whenever we've done the public, what do you call it, questions, and people say that parks are brilliant and, we get 97% and so
The
forth.
surveys, yep.
Governance is like 5% or something. I mean, there's an enormous disparity. So I would have thought that would have been an important key performance driver. Now, I know that is not actually the governors group. That response is more about us than it is about, it's more about councillors than it is actually about performance of governance. But should that not be an objective for us collectively to try to increase that number?
I think it sits in the activity for strategy policy, doesn't it, Rhiannon? So it will be mentioned further on. This is the governance
Thank you.
activity that Michael Morris looks after.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So the next one that we've got is the planning and reporting activity. So this is again another split. It was all together with governance last LTP. And now we've got a split with planning and reporting out by itself.
So, kia ora, councillors. Again, this is a new activity. Previously, strategy, all the strategy elements were part of democratic process along with governance. There's now this proposed planning and reporting activity. So this covers a number of areas that are managed by other managers as well. So I'm just speaking to the whole activity here in one go. So the government's proposal is that all planning and mandatory reporting elements all be brought together. So that includes the district planning, corporate planning, as well as economic development and community development planning where that is as well. So the majority of the areas within the activity are legally required and directed, and there's no capital spend. So this is really about just cutting and dicing the picture a little differently. So just covering off the district plan and the regional spatial plan, the majority of this currently has been delivered via consultant. There's quite a high level of uncertainty, obviously, just with reform at the moment. It's good progress being made on these elements. You've been receiving regular reporting. The spatial planning will come together at a regional level shortly, and no additional resources or changes are proposed for this activity at this point in time. It's just intended to carry on until we're clearer on what is happening in that reform space, and obviously with the question of amalgamation coming as well. corporate planning, which covers the long-term plan to annual plans and all the associated many documents that sit underneath that, form the core of the corporate planning, along with internal performance reporting. So obviously we do that on a continuous planning cycle. We're into the hard end of that work right now, as you're aware, with all of these workshops that we're having. As you can see there, the vast majority of the cost of direct operational expenditure on this activity is the audit. We're not proposing any budget changes on this item either. The next part is mandatory reporting, which obviously the key part of that is the annual report. It is led from the financial services area, and we then contribute all the key performance indicators from a service perspective into that. And again, no budget changes. It is the audit costs that are the significant costs on that line item. There is the resident satisfaction survey and the carbon reporting assessment that we have done as well, and you'll receive information on that shortly. Other area, bylaws and policies. We are a little under-resourced on this area at the moment, just in terms of getting the right staff with the right skills. There's no direct operational expenditure. Economic development plan. So this is an interesting area in terms of what the government's proposing in this new structure, is that all of the plans sit together. So we spoke briefly about that in the council meeting yesterday in terms of the proposed levels of service. So it may be that one of them sits within this activity. Community development planning is something that this council has historically been quite lightly resourced on. We're not proposing any changes at this point in time, given what's happening with proposed amalgamation, but it's probably something that would be really good to look at next long-term plan cycle. The primary way that we support the community through this council is through the Community Wellbeing Fund, and we'll touch on that and have an overview of it this afternoon in the grants activity workshop. We do have some other programs that we support, obviously really important Youth Council, Welcoming Communities. We provide a little bit of support for the Combined Disability Network as well. One thing that would usually sit under this area is community planning for smaller communities. That's something that the Bluff Community Boards had reports on over the last few years. They've chosen to stick with the Bluff Muripahui Tourism Master Plan rather than develop a specific plan for the community, but under a new local board structure, obviously, if that was to come in, that would evolve as well. So again, not proposing any change, but following the regional spatial strategy, this would be a really good time to look at that again. So this is where we've got the KPI, Mayor, that you were referring to before, in terms of being able to understand and participate in the democratic planning and decision-making process. So proposing to retain that KPI and to slowly lift the target over time. I think I will flick on to one of the background slides, actually, which has an interesting bit of benchmarking with other councils. So it is a bit small up on the screen, but hopefully you can see it on your slide deck. It just shows where we're sitting. We are that dark blue line in terms of satisfaction with democratic process. So you can see we are towards the bottom of the middle, perhaps, might be a non-technical way to describe that. So I think we have been conscious of the need to do work in that area. It is a really complex one. We talked about it right at the beginning of this long-term planning cycle, in terms of there are many factors that go into community satisfaction in that area. When we looked at some of that qualitative feedback, we can see that there's definitely been an improvement in terms of people being aware that consultation and engagement is taking place, people understanding what the issues are, but still some dissatisfaction when they feel perhaps the community or portions of the community feel that they haven't been listened to in the decision making. Ultimately, that's a really tricky one. Consultation is just one portion of the information that you all receive as governors and that inform your decision making, but it's something that we can continue to focus on.
Excuse me, may I have a question there?
Yes.
Yes. So have you been in touch with any of these other councils that are doing better? Have you got ideas for improving the way we collect information?
Yes, we have. We've started to have some of those conversations. I think we're doing a lot of what other councils are doing. I think, for example, our comms team is well recognised as doing a really great job on social media and helping to connect. So you can see that in the qualitative feedback over the years. There's fewer people who are dissatisfied who are saying the reason is because they didn't know that the engagement was taking place or that they felt the information wasn't what they needed to help inform their feedback. It tends to be quite responsive to if there's a particular decision that's been taken by council that's not been as popular and quite reactive. But it is something we are looking into, yep.
Thank you. Councillor Broad.
Yeah, no, sorry, Chair, that was essentially the question, was what do we understand about what those councils in the top third are doing, but you've essentially answered it.
Councillor Dermody.
Yeah, a couple of things on those stats. One is, you know, there's not many bigger councils ahead of us. Napier's probably the only one. But secondly, maybe being at the bottom of the list is best because, you know, the nature of their business is people only let us know when they're not happy. And so if they're not replying to things, then it probably is a sign that we're not in their lives and we're not making their lives difficult. So it could be the inverse of the feedback we get, potentially.
Yeah, I think that is a really, really good point, Councillor. And we are always trying to reach the people that are not the ones that might submit, not that those people's views are not important. Of course they are, everyone's views are important, but to hear from those people that perhaps have a different range of perspectives. And that's why, you know, it's really encouraging to see some of that engagement, for example, that we've done at Invercargill Central and those kind of locations, just to get some touch points with different audiences. Yep.
Thanks.
So then the second KPI that you can see up there is the one linked to economic development. So it will just be clearer when the legislation finally lands exactly where that KPI would sit, whether within the economic development activity. But at this point, it looks like they're wanting to put all planning together, and then the operational parts of economic development would sit separately. We're not proposing any KPIs on the delivery of the legal aspects of the plan, as kind of taking that as the minimum required. So that is it. That's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. It's basically proposing steady as she goes on the planning front. We are meeting our legal requirements. And obviously we've touched on during the Head Start discussions around possibly putting forward to government for some statutory relief around audit at this time might be something useful to consider.
Thank you. We'll just move on.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So the next is corporate services. So corporate services is what's left after they've pulled out the some of these other aspects that we're going to see. We've seen already and says later, so I'll pass over to Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. As Patricia has said, corporate services is not so much the leftovers, but the backbone, the backbone of council that is supporting all of our front-facing services. So in my imagery here, we're beneath the waterline, supporting what is above the waterline. And again, just taking, it's a number of service areas that come together. They're quite different service areas, but there are common themes throughout in terms of challenges and direction, and that is the impact of our changing legislative landscape, our changing digital landscape, and that challenge to respond and support the business with what we have and finding efficiencies where we can. There is a raft of legislation that the corporate services area needs to contend with. I don't have a full count, but a quick look in the finance area. I believe I identified more than 10 pieces of legislation that they, if not more, that they have to contend with. So it is quite a large beast in corporate services. Looking at the key issues, again, keeping this quite high level, in the data information and technology space, The increasing costs to service this area is an ongoing challenge and will continue to be an ongoing challenge. In the capital workshops, we discussed the increasing cost of hardware. It is no different in the software space as well, increasing costs there. But it does not take too much of a Google search to see a number of news articles that show you the repercussions of not maintaining our software, our cybersecurity, our system integrity. Plenty of examples, unfortunately, of data breaches. It is simply a case of the cost to protect our council and our data is increasing. And to protect ourselves, we need to try to meet that. In the health and safety and wellbeing space, again, much of the challenges will not be news to you. There have been a lot of news articles addressing psychosocial issues that council faces, council staff face. There's increasing changes to regulation, and again, just a cost of maintaining visibility across those and responding to that. Continue.
Thank you, pardon. I didn't see you, Andrew. Thank you.
I think we need flags, like a mailbox. Just going back to that, the imagery, and you talked about the spine and the hidden backbone of council. And I remember when we had our induction, we were at the Calvin, and I think we were shown a collection of great videos that talked about the staff and the different roles, and that was going to be, I don't know how it was going to be used, but my assumption was it was a bit of a campaign to demonstrate the value of the different roles that we have kind of behind the scenes, and what is happening with that, and how do you demonstrate? It might be a...
It was for internal purposes, councillor.
Oh, I thought it was fantastic, because I thought it did give the...
It was to help you all understand a little bit more about what we do.
Oh, okay. It was a great video. I thought the public would have actually liked those.
Councillor Dermody?
Yeah, like this is a real critical piece of how we do business, isn't it? So just thinking about, and I see there are some measures further on in the pack, which are largely what do the customers think? What other measurements, feedback, do we have in place to know that we're really good in this area?
Well, from an information services perspective, we have a number of internal KPIs around system uptime, system availability, whether those are internal systems or external systems. We put a lot of emphasis on maintaining, high uptime on a quarterly basis. We have other measures around how we're managing incidents that occur, so cyber type incidents that occur. We do also, as you're probably well aware, we run spam phishing campaigns across the organisation, and we're looking for improvement, and where we don't see improvement, we target education in those areas. We get very heavily involved in the Cyber Security Awareness Week, which is coming up. So we are doing a lot of work to publicise internally the importance of good security, for instance, and good system reliability.
A lot of that stuff's risk, right, which is really important. What about sort of business enablement? How do we measure that in terms of this function enables us to do business more efficiently, more effective?
Well, yeah, so we through our continuous improvement team, the business process improvement team, when we look at new projects, we're always looking at opportunities to improve business. I think that is the opportunity in terms of balancing off the increasing cost around cyber, is how can we be more efficient and effective with respect to how we deliver services, whether it's direct to the customer or ratepayer or the business that we're providing services to. So, that's there's a constant continuous improvement program that's taking place internally.
Yeah, so if you look at the sort of the big transformation we're doing, and the pay thing is part of it, and appreciate, at the start of a project, we always have aspiration around this or how much we'll do, but how do we measure that to know that investment's paying off for us? Do we do any of that? Are we measuring the actual effectiveness of that change in system?
That's probably a question for Mr. Garnett.
Could you repeat the question for me, please, Brian?
you know, when you do these projects, you see, oh, we're going to make this efficiency, da-da-da-da-da, but how do we actually know, and, you know, right through the organisation, including at this level, that we actually have delivered, you know, the as we expected to with a change in our platforms or technology or business improvement? Because, you know, it's an ROI thing, right? If we say we're going to make a 10% efficiency and we actually make a 15%, that's massive change in the entities. But are we measuring that? When do we see that? How are we holding ourselves accountable to? We said this project was going to change our business by 10% efficiency, and it has, or it hasn't?
So for things like the digital program, we've got a business benefits framework, and so there is each project will have specific business benefits it needs to deliver on. Those would normally happen, they embed over time, so you get project delivery and then you start to bank those business benefits later. I think that it is difficult to quantify often. However, there's no reason you shouldn't try and quantify. I think what we have is that there is certain investments that keep us operating in today's current environment that may not have direct business benefits, but you do get, like we've clearly over the last few decades had more and more digital investment, and we've had, we all sit here now with board books, with iPads and things like that actually provide a significant higher level of ability than sitting there with a board pack that you would read hundreds of pages of slides ahead of time kind of thing. So there is areas where those digital investments affect individual teams, and there's areas where they affect the whole business as a whole. But effectively banking some of those, they can be demonstrated to a level, but it's probably not a science, is probably what I'd say.
Don't measure them.
Amir? Yes, Tom?
Services is an area that tends to get bigger and bigger over time as people ask for new things to be done, internally and externally. My question is about how brutal are we, if I can use that word, at looking at what we do and deciding what does not need to be done. Rather than every time somebody, we're terrible for it, right? We might ask for something for a report and then suddenly that just adds another report. At the same time as you're doing that, you've really got to be looking at what no longer has to be done. Can we eradicate a whole lot of stuff? Can we cleanse the system that way? Do we do that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we do. So we do it by the types of things that we are seeing. So by we measure what we do in customer services every week, right down to the number of tickets we sell at the Lotto and Bluff. And we look at that to make sure we're on top of systemic issues and understanding how we can make do with the resources we've got to make it as lean as possible. So things like we don't have 3 cashiers anymore, and we haven't for years, and that's what it used to be like. Even though there might be high volume times, we actually have to say to customers, put up a sign to say there will be delays today because we can't fund a level of service to always have 3 cashiers for once a quarter having a tranche of either, say, dog registrations or cash payments for rates. We monitor how we also deliver services, so finding areas where we can improve an RFS or request for service, for example, and tracking that through and finding where the blockages are. So it's within what we do every day, and it's not extra resource we're putting in. We just make it part of our BAU, and where we find something that needs to be tweaked, we get the people who can make the decisions, and then we change it to make a better outcome. A good example of that was the process for reporting a lost bin. That is now improved immensely from what it used to be, but it's just we take things as they come in. We don't have the resources to dedicate to always looking at everything every day. We take those high volume things that we get 80% of. So it's things like streaming that dog registration, and that's not finished yet. Or when we get a call about the rates, how can we make it as easy as possible to follow it through. But we absolutely run a very, very lean team.
Thank you, Trudy. Councillor De Vries.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm just kind of following on from Councillor Dermody's statements around how we measure those improvements. And I thought that we had raised this in earlier council meetings around the business transformation project and how we were going to start seeing metrics or a return on investment. And I thought we were going to be receiving a paper or information on that. So just to clarify, that's not happening. We won't be receiving that.
Yes, you did, and yes, it is coming back to council, to the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
In this year? Yeah.
Councillor Dermody.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear, and thanks for following that up, Andrew. Look, to Trudy's point, I think we're quite good at evaluating our people performance in terms of our responsiveness to queries, RFSs, all that sort of stuff. You know, I think we're actually hold ourselves really accountable around that stuff. Probably my question's more around that information technology piece, which is big investment. We need to make sure that that's the stuff that's really delivering us. So it'll be good to see that report and make sure the accountability statement is there from we said this was going to do this and it's actually doing this, and hopefully it's doing more. Because, you know, if we held those investments to the accountability that we hold our people, you know, I think our business would get a bit of an uplift. So I think that's the challenge we've got to do, is we've got to, you know, take what we do with our people and the accountability and hold that accountability to other aspects of our business, particularly non-people pieces, because they're big, chunky bits.
Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing that report at some stage.
Yeah.
Yep.
Through you, Chair, a number of my next points may have already been covered in discussion, but in terms of people and culture, we do have, again, not a unique to this council, key issue of scarce specialists available to us, particularly in the likes of engineering and planning and contract and project management spaces. It is the challenge in a competitive market to attract talent and retain that talent, and also develop our own talent pipelines. In terms of finance, I've already touched on briefly just the complexity of this space, and again, changing regulations such as local water done well, and the requirements of ring fencing add to the workload of that team, in addition to continuing to change manual processes to automated processes to find the efficiency that council has just touched on. Sorry, slight distraction here. Moving into our customer services spaces, again, Trudy's touched on some of the challenges here. Customer services, we have gone to, a number of lengths to try and find the most efficient services there without reducing levels of service. There is increasing expectation from the community for more technical support at that first point of contact with council. Again, particularly in building and planning spaces. But again, this is a team that is trying to provide that first point of contact for all of council services, which in itself is a challenge to be across. You will undoubtedly be well aware of the work in our risk and improvement spaces with regular reports to council from Peter Patton, and just the importance of that area in terms of positioning council as well as possible to be ready for audits to mitigate risk to council, whether that be reputational, financial or otherwise. And in our procurement space, again, not a unique challenge to this council, but again, stretched resources to try and really drive the value, particularly in our procurement processes at a large scale, and making sure that we are doing everything efficiently and well and compliant with legislation there. Ultimately, my summation for the corporate services activity is that when it is going well, it is largely invisible, but when it does falter, the entire organisation feels the impact of that. That concludes, Chair, this part of the key issues at this time.
Any other questions? Thank you for that.
Now I'm going to head over to Richard Hutton to discuss this one.
So these are the operational bids that we've been putting up with respect to the digital improvement program. So this program is really designed to support the council's technology and business systems. The key here is it's not a case of one and done. We have to look for continuous improvement. We have to look to conduct continuous upgrades. Otherwise, we fall behind and put ourselves at risk, the sort of risks that Rebecca's just taken us through. So our council program through to 2030, what we're proposing is an additional $150,000 per year for 3 years, and that just allows us to actually take advantage of some of the features we're now getting in Tech One. For example, our latest upgrade, we're now in a position where the solution provides us with a capability to exit out a third-party application that we are paying for separately. So, these are the sorts of things that have been presented to us, and it's really a case of just recognising that we need some funding to be able to make sure that we can take advantage of those benefits that are now being provided actually in the solution we're getting from Tech One in terms of the built-in capability and what they're developing over the timeframes that we've got it. Beyond 2030, there's the need for us to actually recognise that there could be significant changes and opportunities in terms of how we provide service delivery, automating business processes, obviously constantly evaluating the opportunity to use AI in some form or another internally and externally. And there's going to be, it's just recognition of the fact that there's costs associated with doing that.
Yes. Let's move on, is it?
Okay, thank you. So we also have software license increases. We mentioned, again, Rebecca mentioned that earlier. We are seeing double-digit increases in software licenses per year. Microsoft, we are part of an all-of-government agreement. That's up for renewal this year, and that, depending on the product range that they choose to increase, we will see significant increases across that solution over the next 3 years. We are also having to add in new software capability to manage cybersecurity, and we are dealing with new requests out of the business to manage different aspects of what they're doing, whether it be around health, safety and wellbeing. So this is really a bid associated with the ongoing increases of software license across all sectors of the organisation.
Councillor Dermody?
Yep. In terms of this overall spend, not just particularly this area, how are we looking forward to see, if there's change when there's change in local government, whatever that looks like, this isn't going to be sunk cost. It's unrecoverable and it's been a waste of money because we've invested it this year and then 2 years' time it's irrelevant because of the way we have to be shaped and structured in our organisation. Are we looking like that?
I don't think such a risk going forward, Councillor. A lot of these software solutions are subscription-based. If you look at Microsoft, that's per head count. So for every person in the organisation, there's an increase on that person of the head count. If you reduce, you reduce. So on a subscription-based licence, there is an opportunity to go up and down based on the service you're providing. It's not the old sort of what we've used to previously. You're making a capital investment and depreciating over years. So the software model is changing. So a benefit of that software model is the opportunity to flex there.
So how confident are we that post change to local government, our council program will be fully effective? So post 2028, whatever we look like, how effective will our council program be as an organisational tool to get business done?
Well, the Our Council program is, our decision taken to use Technology One to deliver the services of ICC. That decision could be expanded to deliver the services for One Southland. The model, the licensing model of Technology One is based on rateable properties, and so it will grow to be able to provide those services if that's the decision that's taken by those people in charge. Yeah.
And equally, if we have to, we pick up the regulatory function in a 2 Southland model, we can do that and integrate that.
So I don't know all of the requirements of the regulatory function, so I'd have to understand those, but I would imagine that I do believe Technology One is providing those sorts of services to other regulatory areas, so we would have to investigate that, but yeah.
So when would we do that?
We can't do that until a decision has been made.
Once the decision's been made.
But it's something that normally the transition team would look at when they decide which systems are to be in use. The tricky thing with any local government organisation is it has to keep everything under the Public Records Act. So it's not like a private enterprise where it might be able to say, okay, anything from 2010 we'll take, but the rest of it we'll just let go. We've actually got to maintain all those records that relate to properties, regardless of where they are in whatever territorial authority. That type of decision, that mahi, isn't done until a decision is reached and a transition entity or organisation is in place. In terms of what this program set out to deliver with Tech One, we have to remember and reflect, as Richard said, it was made on a decision for Invercargill City Council. It wasn't looking at a single unitary authority or a 2TA example.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Obviously, we'll need to consider that as we move forward, but if it's a strong basis there, surely that will give you a good platform to build from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also, I mean, the bigger challenge when you're dealing with the consolidation of systems is data migration and quality of data in all of the systems, and the ability for you to be able to move that into the what is going to be the host system, the new host system, in a structured and managed way to get the outcomes you're looking for. Data migration, just about on all of these sorts of things, is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, look, and I know the complexity and challenges of it. However, because we're dealing with public money, I think we've got the requirement, that's not the right word, but to look a bit ahead and say, well, if that was to play out, we should do this, or we maybe should hold off doing that, because we don't want to just sink a whole lot of money in and then, that was a waste of time because it doesn't now work and we've, burned up a couple of $1 million.
I think the solutions we're choosing, Councillor, are scalable solutions.
Yeah, good, okay.
We just have to remember, I just want to jump in here, we just have to remember in relation to this LTP, we can't make assumptions in relation to the local government reorganisations. We've been told to pretty much take a pretty straight line on it, and we're still waiting for further direction from the Audit Office. But making decisions because we think there's going to be a different structure in 2 years is not what we've been told to do in this LTP. We've been told to do it as if ICC continues, so we have to make keep that direction rather than making those changes. It's a little strange, but it's how we've been directed to do the long-term plan.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, look, I think I understand that, but it's equally not a free pass.
No.
Directive, though.
Michael.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't be stupid.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through yourself, Chair. Look, it's something that crossed my mind and had a discussion with the executive as well in relation to whether all the current change of legislation before us, is it something that you need to stop and pause and consider the impact in relation to wise use of ratepayers' funds? The flip side to it is, and it was highlighted, as getting the data in the right order and structure for the future. Given that's the underpin of the program for data to inform information, to create insight, that's what we're trying to achieve in the first phase. From that perspective, it's not a you should pause situation. We actually need to almost accelerate if we can to try and be in the best position no matter what that future is, because our data is not really in a great position for a transition right now. All councils are pretty much in that position as it stands. We're trying to get ourselves in the best position no matter what, so there's a lower cost profile into the future. Whether we achieve that in the time frame, it depends on what time frame we're dealing with as a council. We're going to keep on our path to try and do the best we can and do the best for our ratepayers to make sure we're in the best position. So that's our objective, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Michael. Somewhat answered the answer that I was going to question to, but I just want to, just for future knowledge, given that our CS has told us that our data is not in the best possible position, along with other councils that we may look to be married to in the future, how much of a system update, or just, I mean, as assumptions, right, would it require to make sure that whatever happens in the future, that transition from where we are now to whatever's going to happen, is there correlation between the systems, between the councils? Like, are we using similar programs? Are we using similar data collections between us, so that it's the transition, should we go there, you know, our investment hasn't been completely lost with the transition? It's a bit of a future thought process.
So if we were to compare ourselves in terms of what I'll call the systems of record, which are the key systems, such as Pathway, which is what runs the property and rating. So Southland District Council currently use Pathway, for instance. Gore use Civica, I believe, so something completely different. We are in a program of work to move to Technology One, away from Pathway. But as part of that, we are, as C has said, we are organising our data to be in a much more structured state. So there are system differences across the board, I would say, Councillor. But you know, at the end of the day, again, it's the underlying data, and it's understanding that a water connection is a water connection is a water connection, for instance.
You got a question? Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, and there's been some really good points brought up, and I think Michael had actually answered some of my questions around how we best prepare ourselves. The other thing I'll just come back to software licenses, I guess, in particular. Do they, and my assumption would be that they would decrease with scale, right, and in a per person type cost? No, increase per person. So an amalgamation isn't going to make it a cheaper option. And my issue is that, and this is not a problem isolated to council, this is anyone that is a user of Microsoft or anything, basically is held over a barrel because you are stuck or locked in to one platform, and they can start to put the price up to whatever, right? So what I would hope to see is an outcome of amalgamation, and not necessarily just an amalgamation of the councils that are within our region, but how this more efficient local government operates is how we collectivise as local government sector and get scale from different platforms that are commonly used, like probably Microsoft.
Councillor Teresa, what is your actual question? Sorry, what are you wanting?
Well, do we get benefit from scale?
So ICC is a member of all of government negotiating for Microsoft, so we take advantage of all government arrangements where we can, and where it's sensible to do that. But generally speaking, we're not at a scale, and even if we were amalgamated, not at a scale where you're in any better negotiating position really with most of the big software players, whether it be the software that you use on your desktop, Microsoft, the rating around a lot of the software licensing around a lot of the rating platforms is based on rateable properties. But then in behind the scenes, the software that we use to run our cybersecurity, for instance, we don't have the scale, so we rely on a lot of government arrangements in that situation to get the best possible leverage we can.
That's a service that the government, central government, already offer and we already take advantage of. So,
yep.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
Michael.
Thank you, through yourself, Chair. I just want to give some perspective in relation to that, because this is part of my my past negotiations component in relation to New Zealand economy in relation to technology. And when I say perspective, our industry is 1% of the local government industry across the world. When you then compare it to the purchasing power of technology players, are they going to look at New Zealand to see if they can give discounts associated to it? they're not in the position that they actually have a significant focus on the New Zealand market in relation to it for public sector from that perspective. Would they design a product for us and the bigger players? No, they won't. The only ones will be when we start to go to the middle tier, and that's why Technology One is a platform we've looked at from that perspective, is that it is a player in that market, and we might get some tweaks and changes in relation to New Zealand public sector, but again, they're a bigger player in the Australian market than they are in the New Zealand market at the moment. So it's the purchasing power that our industry has to whether we'll get economies of scale and savings in that perspective. There's a chance, but we are a small fry in the world market in relation to technology as it is today. Microsoft, for example, they don't really hold us, we can't hold them to ransom, I should say, in relation to our ability to purchase. So scale for them, they're talking hundreds of thousands of employees before you're at a scale, not thousands. So from a New Zealand economy, it is really difficult to be a big player, and we do rely on government trying to do it from a national perspective, which only increases it to, say, about 5%, not 1%. So it is really pushing it when we try to do it. But if government can get us some discounts, then that's our best avenue.
Thank you. Right, Ruby.
CCTV centralisation. So the proposal is that we consolidate a number of the cameras that we have across council premises now onto the platform that we've delivered for roading. So a lot of benefits in terms of doing that. We have approximately 193 cameras across the various sites in the organisation at the moment. The reality is that we can, by consolidating, we have one source of the information, and we have one place to go for the information. Data ownership and storage becomes more clearly defined, and we have a better opportunity to actually provide a longer lasting service than that we currently have at the moment. So there's a cost associated with doing that. Obviously, there is some costs associated with increased storage. As we increase the number of cameras, they plug into servers, and there's a need to increase the number of servers to be able to do that, and that's what makes up the cost, an additional operating cost as a result of it centralising CCTV.
Any questions? Sorry,
front.
Didn't see you there.
While I understand the rationale behind centralising the various systems, isn't there also some redundancy in the fact that they're not centralised currently? So if the park system went down, it's not taking down the CBD CCTV as well. Whereas if, let's say, that a unified system went down, everything's gone. And so we've no continued surveillance over council buildings, over parks.
Yes and no. And if your parks server went down in the example you used, then you lose all the cameras in the parks, whereas if one park's camera goes down, you just lose one park's camera. So there is a risk associated with a fibre connection being cut and therefore in isolation, but all of the cameras have what they call SD cards, and so record to that in the event that occurs, and so there is no loss of footage. So when recently we had a camera hit a traffic light, the fibre was cut, but the cameras continued to record, and we were able to retrieve footage from that situation. So there is redundancy within the camera itself anyway, Councillor.
Standing, thank you.
Just a note on this one, Chair. This slide was prepared ahead of yesterday's council meeting, where council confirmed the interim capital program position of an archive extension would be considered outside of the 27 to 37 LTP. So may I suggest, if there are no objections, I just move to the next slide with other options.
Sense, yep.
So during the capital workshops, I presented to Council the issue of our current archive facilities storage capacity. The unforeseen events of the last 18 or so months have seen the projections for archive storage to shrink significantly to the point where we are near capacity now, rather than nearing capacity in 2033, as previously expected. I present here a couple of options for off-site storage that is compliant, and just a note on that, the Public Records Act is applicable, as many of you know, to our council, and under that Act, the Chief Archivist is empowered to issue instructions and standards, and one of which is an instruction around the facility requirements for the storage of protected local council archives. The two options here, the first one, the minimum volume, that really addresses the current overflow that cannot fit into our current archive facility, and this would be relocating those council archives to a facility in Dunedin. It, of course, does have an impact to service internally in terms of just a slight delay in retrieving any of those archives, but furthermore an impact to service for our community, whereby we would not be able to continue to collect from our community as we have done for the last 18 or so years, and would require council to consider other measures such as potentially a moratorium on collecting or a review of our current collecting scope. The second option of additional volume would be to send not only the overflow but also some council records currently held in the archive facility to Dunedin. The numbers I'm suggesting would allow for short to medium continued current service levels, being, at my best estimation, 5 to 6 years of collecting at our current rates, barring any unexpected large donations. And again, some delayed accessibility in terms of retrieving those records back, but would allow us to continue at current service levels for a time.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you. Just of interest to listening to you explain the current situation and the capacity issue. If our archives were, or a portion of them were to be situated up in Dunedin, how many requests quarterly would you envision that people would require information from out of the Dunedin storage area? Like, how often are our archives now being accessed?
That is a difficult one to give firm figures on, Councillor. We do have some property-related material currently in storage in Dunedin, and there are weekly retrievals of material there for those purposes. In terms of broader legoimas, it's in responding to those, it does ebb and flow, so it would be difficult for me to give you a figure, but at the moment, with just the small amount that we do have, and I say a small amount, it is approximately 700 linear metres currently residing in Dunedin, we are retrieving weekly at this time.
Has some thought gone to prioritising what we keep close to us here and historical things that perhaps wouldn't be so utilised, portioned up to Dunedin, so that we've got, it's hard, I guess it's hard to tell really, but I would assume that's been thought of.
Yes, yeah, certainly, Councillor. And in my experience, at the beginning of my career, I was told that 10% of records are asked for 90% of the time, and I have found that to be true. So we would look to keep that 10% closer to home, with the 90% to Dunedin.
I think, Rebecca, I'm sure there'll be some kind of culling that you do. You'll have a criteria, because it can't just keep building up indefinitely, can it?
Oh, absolutely, Chair. We work to a retention and disposal schedule that we draw ours from ALGAM, which is the Association of Local Government Information Management. That is one that has been through and approved by Archive New Zealand, and it sets out, there is a core class of record that we must keep under the Public Records Act, but it also incorporates other legislation such as tax legislation and the retention period for those records. So that retention and disposal schedule covers everything from permanent retention that form our archive right through to transitory records that have a very short-term retention period.
And currently, do you accept anything from the community they bring to you?
We do. Our collecting scope, to the best of my knowledge, we're the only archive in the country that services all three types of archives, and that is obviously our own council archives, Southland Community Archives, and we're also an approved repository, which means that we're authorised to hold on behalf of Archives New Zealand, and for us it is predominantly school records, which from a community perspective is part of that 10% high use records for research and particularly genealogy for our local community.
So does that need reviewing at any stage? Can we continue to collect all of that?
That pens the decision of council, Chair. If we will struggle to continue to collect at that scope if we were to take the option of the minimum volume moved, because it does not alleviate any of the capacity issue in the current facility. We would be able to continue collecting that scope if we were able to move additional volume to Dunedin at this time.
Any further questions? Darren, I did see it.
It's a question a little outside of the LTP process, but one I think would be a useful perspective. Do we know if the legislative requirements for archiving are being met by the neighbouring TAs?
You worry about inheritance of
Yeah.
issues. Yeah.
Because that serves to capacity, and it's outside what we're supposed to be looking at in the LTP process, but, potentially, it's a real issue.
Through you, Chair, I'm probably not in a position to confirm one way or the other, Councillor, with regard to other local authorities.
Anyone else want to have a guess? Silence around and we all got wet. Very safe. Thank you.
Assumptions. Councillor De Vries, do you have a question?
Would it be reasonable to assume that as we move further into the technology age, that the physical archives will in some way stabilise or reduce because everything is digitised?
Yes, Councillor, that is a fair assumption. Though, if I may, Chair, there is, from a community perspective, there is still an awful lot of physical records out there, and not all of our community groups are yet operating in a digital environment. So, very correct that it will taper off, but that is not in this moment.
Not in this next 10 years, right, thank you.
Well, I think that seems to be all the questions about that. That's a real problem, isn't it? Where you can see that. Thanks.
History by its very nature continues to accumulate.
And other whakatauki. Right, on to...
Just a comment through you, Chair, on corporate savings. We have actively looked for savings to keep corporate services within budget. We've touched on that with a few examples today. We are trying to deliver more at the same cost in response to the community demand and those changing expectations and complexities. And as noted and discussed with the archives example, further cost savings would require a review of levels of service. And then just finally on measuring performance, just to note that with regard to percentage of requests for service resolved within service levels, that is a change to how we measure that. Previously it was a case of under investigation or resolved within 10 working days, and it did not address the nuances that each service level have different expectations. So now looking to just measure that slightly differently. A proposed new one around local supplier spend being at or above 10% of total annual spend. And the final one Again, a change in the way that we are measuring that around our percentage of time council customer service channels are available. Previously, our in-person, so our Bluff Service Centre and our Customer Services Centre in the in Tahanaki were measured by hours of operation, and that again is just a simplification to a percentage measure.
Thank you very much. I think we see the picture, I think, quite clearly.
And that is me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll take a break now, and then we'll come back for marketing communications. Just take a 10-minute break, I think, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Whatever long it takes. It's interesting. All right, so now after that break, we're ready to look at marketing and communications. Thank you, Lisa. I'll leave that to you.
Good morning. So, communications and marketing is one of the new activities that Patricia mentioned at the beginning. So this will be the first time that communications and marketing has had its own activity management plan, which I think is probably a good time for us. We've evolved quite a lot over the past few years. We're no longer a service that just puts out media releases and makes posters. We're a lot more strategic now, and we do provide a service for across the wider organisation as well. Excuse all of the words. I do love words. I'll try and whip through and keep this pretty simple. So some of the key issues that we're looking at in our area. Demand is a really big one. That strategic comms, marketing, content, design, video, the demand for that continues to grow. And right across the organisation, all of the projects the council's doing, all of the campaigns and facilities that we're needing to promote. Council decisions and projects are being increasingly scrutinised online, which means we need to be a lot more proactive in everything that we're putting out. We need to be prepared with information. People expect to see the information. It needs to be there and clear and accurate. The opening of Te Anua is a big one, and I'll be talking about that later on as well. Changes in, or not changes, more capital projects, emergency management, the local government reform, central government reform, all of those things have more requirements as well. Communities are expecting things to be a lot quicker. They want real-time information, particularly during emergencies or significant events. And specialised ways of communicating. There's an increase in expectation around video, photography, digital content needs to be right for all of the different platforms that people are on now. And just further to that as well, so huge increase in expectation around things being quick, transparent, digital rather than traditional platforms. And because of all of those new platforms, it's actually a lot more challenging to be able to reach all the sections of the community through a single communications approach. We can no longer, put an ad in the newspaper and expect people to know what's going on here, because someone might read it in the newspaper, somebody might see it on Facebook, somebody might see it on our website or a poster physically in person. There's a whole lot more channels that are required to reach as many people as we can. And that changing media landscape as well. The reduction in regional local reporting means that we have a real need to have our own communication channels and direct connection with the community, rather than relying on the reducing reach of media to do those things for us. And then AI, misinformation, trust. AI is really changing the way that people are searching and consuming information about us. I'm sure you've all seen a Google AI summary when you're looking things up online. We need to make sure that our information is clear so that AI can summarise it correctly and people are getting accurate information, and that we are really that source of truth when it comes to the information that we share on our websites and our channels as well, when there is so much misinformation going around online, or if we're not quick enough, then people put out their own information to fill the gaps, or speculation can fill those gaps. Specialist capability is a real challenge for us. So as I mentioned, we do need a really broad expertise across all of those different disciplines: media, digital, marketing, design, photography, video, social media, and recruiting for and retaining those specialist skills, not just at council but across Southland, is really challenging. And as those technologies evolve, new skills are needed, or different people that have those different skills. It's really difficult to find somebody that can write and manage media and understand social media and take photos and design and all of that. That I would say that's quite impossible. And our centralised team here at council really helps to make the best use of that capability, so that we have a reduced duplication, that each individual facility across council does not need to have its own team because they have that expertise in the one team. The change that we're going through now, or that is coming for us, means that we have an increased need for internal communication for staff, that we need to be communicating about that at the same time as it's happening, and the same time that everything else continues to operate day to day. And then finally, a real need and increasing expectations for us to communicate for a range of audiences, to ensure that we have accessible information in plain language, that we are using culturally appropriate communication as well.
Lisa, we have a question. Councillor Dermody.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Lisa, that AI trust misinformation is probably a greater risk than we perhaps understand, potentially. Is there any thinking, the old bank watermark, you hold up the light to make sure it's real. Is there anything in the technology world that is there, or we may be able to use to validate that it's such a genuine, post or information from council online? What's the sort of where are we at with that in technology world? Not us, but the market.
Yeah, so across social media in particular, we can have a verified page where you get the little blue tick or whatever the channel uses, which I do believe we have on our council page, and that requires that we prove that we're humans. They have to contact us via phone and that type of thing to get the tick. And I think it's just really about building that trust with our communities to know that we are the page to come to, or that our website is the correct website, and they, recognise things like .govt.nz, or they get to know us, and that does sometimes take a little longer. Our council channels are pretty solid now, I would say.
Because if you think through an emergency event, you want misinformation's as big a danger to people's safety as sort of not being able to find information in.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is one of those reasons that we try to be as quick as we can, and to provide evidence-based communication, so referring back to other trusted sources like emergency management, civil defence, that kind of thing.
So would most of the punters know to look for that tick, that it's a verified site?
No. It's a user thing, really. It's like a car. Just because you can drive a car doesn't mean you're a good driver. The number of people who use online media as a source of information don't necessarily know to check for those verifications.
Is there, need for us, a bit like our rubbish bins, to educate them around how to use them? Not comparing this to rubbish bins.
I'll go back to drivers. You want everyone to be a good driver, it doesn't mean they're going to be. There's always going to be a risk. If I can check, what's the risk? Because communications as a sector is one of the hungriest that exists in the modern workplace. So our risk is that you have an excellent team. How do we ensure that we do as much as we can to retain them?
I think that it comes down to the individual sometimes and that type of thing, but we do have a really good team that really care about the work that they do, and we have the trust from ELT and this council to do our best work and be creative in those types of things. So I think those will help.
It's a cultural thing.
I think so.
In the end, everybody has a price, but you create the best culture within the team that encourages people to feel valued and want to continue to be a part of it.
And we've seen that grow over the period that I've been involved, not the long time Mr Ludlow's been involved, but we've seen it develop and be a good, strong team. Yeah. Okay, I think we'll just carry on. Thank you.
So this is really just an overview of all of the services that we provide, which I've already touched on a little: communications advice and planning, implementation, that reputational risk analysis and managing issues before they become an issue is something probably quite new and big that we do now, working directly on projects as they are initiated. Marketing strategy as well, internal communications. Media is really significant. We probably receive around 30 to 40 media queries per month, which do take a significant amount of time to work through. Social media and digital channel management as well. We have 20 profiles across our different facilities and across all of the multiple social media platforms that are available, and I would say that is taking a conservative approach, as we don't like to spread ourselves too thin across too many channels. Likewise with the website, intranet, we have around 10 of those to manage: graphic design, photography, videography and creative services on one line, but rather significant. And then brand signage, emergency and crisis communications as well. Emergency communications in that we also support a wider Southland emergency response for public information management as required. And just quickly on our current performance, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've really evolved over the past few years since we had the communication strategy put into place, and we do have internal goals that we work towards with campaigns and with our channel stats, and those are consistently achieved or exceeded. We have grown our social media audiences by over 300% in the past year, one of the fastest growing councils, I believe. Over 30 million views on Facebook alone, so a wee number for you. Marketing campaigns are also, achieving measurable outcomes across our facilities. We are able to use the data and insights now that we have been developing that over a few years to actually inform what we're doing and improve it. And the initiatives in our communications strategy, which some of you will have been involved in when that was back in 2022, those are largely complete now, and that includes things like our website upgrade and various strategies and processes within the team as well. And that brings me to the one bid for additional operational budget that we are putting forward for this LTP, and that is to support the additional marketing and communications for Te Anau when it opens next year. So Te Anau is obviously one of Council's most significant community assets and a really big investment for you, and opening the doors for that museum is really just the beginning in terms of marketing communications. It's going to require an ongoing program to develop that audience and support visitation, storytelling and that digital content that we've been talking about, and encourage people to come from within the city, the region and the country or wider again. So to ensure that we can really maximise that, the value and the community benefit of your investment into the museum and support all of those things, as well as protect that level of service that we deliver for the other facilities across council. We're asking for an additional operational there to deliver that. There's another option up there that we continue with our existing resources. I would just note that additional budget there does reflect that we will absorb some of this additional work within our current team and our current resourcing things like those specialist skills that I mentioned, like video and social media and that type of thing, you know, that will just sort of get added to that as well. Happy to take any questions.
Lisa, do you see that as an operational budget going on annually, or is it a one-off?
Annually, yeah.
Mayor?
I think whenever we hear individual presentations, Chair, whether it is, you know, this one, or whether it's, you know, other ones we've heard already, no doubt will continue here, they always inevitably are additional costs required. You know, I don't see too many where we are brought a paper that says we're going to use less money. It's always more money. And I understand the reason for that, because the demands that we place, community places on, you know, almost everything that we do, but certainly including the quality of our communications, the community demands and our demands just steadily increase. But we just cannot afford to do everything. And I'm really concerned I mean, each individual one is extremely well argued and is, you know, absolutely you can see the need. But the collective impact on them is so significant. And I just wonder, as we go through these, you know, individually, kind of line item by line item, and say, yep, no, that's a really good idea. You know, we do at some point need to step back and say, what have we just approved in terms of cost and in terms of our rates increase? And I know we do get to that point. Patricia grabs the microphone. I know we do get to that point, but I'm just concerned as we go through them individually, and you know, as managers and group managers come and we nod and accept and agree, you know, that the reality is that at some point we're going to have to put all that together and say, how are we going to be able to afford this? And the answer is probably we can. Or that's why I often say, every time we look at what new thing we're going to do, we really should be looking at what old thing we're going to stop doing, so that we're getting a balance.
So, Mayor, you are dead right. We will have an opportunity to come back once we've gone through all these sessions. The teams will then put together their activity plans. They've already, which also gives the direction of which budget bids go into the first cut of the budget. That will be reviewed by ELT, because I suspect, as you have, that the number might be large before it will come back for you, and we'll advise what things need to be done. But at this point, we are still pulling together all those last budgets, so I can't even give you an inkling of what it's like, but we will be doing that. This is why this next phase through from August through to November, when we lock down the budget, are probably the most critical.
Sorry, Chair, if I may just chip in again. This is a workshop, we're not making any decisions, but we are nevertheless nodding and being supportive, you know, when managers present papers, and I hope, you know, they understand that it's going to have to go through a bit of filter, a reality check before they actually get approved.
We do appreciate the fact that you have modified this already, hoping to be able to use this. Grant, do you have?
Yeah, further to Mayor Campbell's point, you know, this is good to understand and see the operational level, but I think what we need to see at governance, and it's good to hear it'll come forward to us, Patricia's, you know, at a much higher level of P&L around what's our operational spend, you know, and then we make some decisions around, you know, give direction to staff around what we want to see in that P&L, as opposed to sort of 150 here and 50 here and 60 here. And I think that's where we need to get to, you know, as a governance team, is make high-level decisions around, we want the staff to head in this direction around operational costs, and how they choose to get there becomes an operational decision.
Councillor de Vries.
Thank you, Chair. In a similar vein, I'm just trying to understand the option B, which is kind of continuing or to support Te Unua through the existing resources. And I guess I'm kind of imagining a bit of a cycle, right? So some things you'll be pushing really hard at one time, and that would be Te Unua as it starts to open, and there'll be maybe other facilities that you'd not be plugging as much, but it could still be done. And would there be, does the comms team, I guess, have full control over those different social media pages and internal promotions? That's never done at the moment by any of those own individual teams?
So largely, yes. The communications marketing team is responsible for all of those channels. However, for facilities, Splash Palace, library, they do contribute to those pages as well, particularly when there are service impacts and that type of thing. The library do have a little more input into their page than the rest at this stage.
It's good to think. Thank you.
Councillor Lidrow.
I think with Te Unua, there's a real opportunity cost that creates a bit of an exception with our communications for the museum and also for council. I mean, we'll have gone for a decade without having an operational, fully open museum. And the number of stories that there will be to tell and the opportunity to leverage off that public perception and pride that will come, much like you'll have seen when we, revitalised the CBD. Everybody was very positive and it reflected well on council. I think that's an opportunity that exists here, and you can do something kind of adequate within existing budgets, or you can leverage off it. And I think the Wait for Te Unua is one of those opportunities that council should consider. And then you've got to carefully manage yourself as an operational arm. I mean, we saw a reasonable degree of negative publicity in the previous term and even a couple this term, and it's a case of making sure that we're always in the best position to be creating good news. It isn't always going to be the case, but there's a lot of opportunity that's going to exist for us when the facility opens.
So just moving on to the proposed level of service, and because this is our first activity management plan in this area, we've deliberately proposed a small number of measures that are meaningful and understandable at this stage. So the first one there being around resident satisfaction. We would look to establish a baseline percentage, and that would come through in the resident survey. And that would be about ensuring that we're delivering timely, accurate, relevant, accessible communications and marketing to effectively inform, promote all of our services and facilities and decisions, opportunities to participate, engagement, elections, that type of thing. And then the second one there is about providing timely responses to media and social media requests. For the reason we've chosen those two is because they're probably the most immediate and publicly visible interactions that we directly manage, and just reflecting the importance of being able to provide information to media so that they can include our information in their stories that they put out, noting that media is very much a 24/7 operation now, and their deadlines are no longer next day for the next day's paper. And likewise with social media, very, very immediate and quick there.
I think that wraps that up. Lisa, thank you for what you do. We're very, you support what we do very well and very publicly, and we appreciate it.
Okay, so the next one is investment. So our investment activities split into two. This is the treasury functions first, and then we'll do the commercial property.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and councillors. So I'm here to talk about council's investments and treasury. So if we move to the next slide.
You've got the slide.
I've got it, sorry. Yeah, so I guess as noted there, the main risk that we're facing in this area is the affordability of interest expense. So as part of our recent annual plan, we do also do a 10-year forecast as part of that model. So on our recently adopted annual plan forecast, we're looking at our debt to increase to 492 million around by June 2036. So that figure will obviously be revised as part of the upcoming LTP budgets at the same time. And that is predominantly driven by significant capital investment. We've got some significant spend in the wastewater and emergency water supply space. So that is a cost to council and ratepayers that we will be looking to actively manage. The other aspect of that is the volatility of interest rates. We've seen it this year with various global events. And we've seen recently the OCR has just risen a couple of weeks ago with a few predicted rate increases before the year end. So we will be working with our Treasury advisors to actively manage that risk. And then as we look to do the financial strategy as part of the LTP, we'll be obviously focusing on affordability of debt will be our main focus in that space. So yeah, as I've touched on, I guess this activity is a wee bit different to the other operational activities. We don't as specifically have levels of service as other activities would do, but we will be providing a treasury service to the water business unit as well. So that'll be an additional, service provided to that space. So in terms of measuring performance is quite simple for us because obviously the numbers are there and we can track how we're going against budget. So we've got two KPIs there. Basically our net interest income is higher than budgeted and our dividend income is in line or greater than budget. So as noted, the dividend comes from ICHL predominantly, and that, as you'll be aware, we're currently receiving the additional 4 million dividend for the next 8 years. So that sits around 9.5 million roughly per year in our budget.
Yeah, just on that, we're using that 4 million dividend not in operational, are we?
Yeah, so I might get Patricia to talk to that because we've had some recent discussions around that.
So that $4 million dividend we're actually using to repay debt. And in particular, it's the debt that council took out to purchase shares in ICHL that allowed the ICL development to go ahead because it required a recapitalisation of ICHL. So that allows that to repay. So we're using holdings to repay it, debt relating to it.
Yeah, so on that point, the main investment activities, I guess you could say, we have our investment in ICHL, which in turn holds investments in EIL, Invercargill Airport, Invercargill Central. So ICHL's profits are predominantly funded by dividends and interest received from those two main entities, the airport and EIL. Council also holds investments in term deposits, So that is a recommendation by our credit rating agency to hold at least $20 million in term deposits. So again, we sort of actively monitor the interest rates that are available on those term deposits. And we've, as noted in the previous annual plan, we've applied some of those term deposits to debt repayment, bringing that down to sort of that $20 million recommended figure. So our current weighted average cost of debt is sitting at 3.44% per our most recent quarterly report, which is tracking lower than the LGFA's current 12-month fixed-term borrowing rate. So we've had some good outcomes in that space recently, but we'll obviously be monitoring that moving forward.
Yeah. So I think in our forecast, what are we using in our forecast for LTP in terms of debt cost?
We're still waiting to get that advice, so we hold off and get that advice from Bancorp based on what they're looking forward through.
Yeah,
So those assumptions are still coming through. We're still waiting on inflation. We're still waiting on those, so they come through towards the end.
I just point out that there's a reference under electricity in Invercargill to ownership of subsidiaries, including impaired generation, and we don't anymore.
So what?
It's been sold.
Oh yeah, so sorry, we just missed that update from that slide.
Yeah.
That was their historic slide. So yeah, there is no more generation sitting within there.
Okay. Yep.
Thanks, Brian. We don't get, because that's the additional slides for information you're just going through.
No further questions? Thanks, Brian.
Perfect, thank you.
Morning, Heather.
Morning, Chair, councillors. So, commercial property, formerly investment property, is the other part of the investment portfolio. I'll just... So, councillors are probably quite well aware some of the key issues for activity are lack of maintenance for improvements owned by the lessees on the land that we lease to them. The lengthy negotiations currently in regards to rental reviews for some perpetually leased properties. We've reduced the portfolio over the past 2 RTPs, which has reduced some of the level of annual return for council. And I've just put a wee question in there, which we will discuss within the activity plan whether the portfolio should be transferred to the council, the CCO, and managed independently, and whether it fits potentially within that space.
When you say transfer to CCO, I mean, given we've already got Holdco, why would you not simply put them into there rather than stand up a different CCO?
I'll let Patricia answer that.
We wouldn't necessarily put them to holdings. We would need them to go to actually a CCO whose role was commercial property management rather than a holdings company. The functionality would be, in what we would need them to do would be very different. If we set them to holdings, holdings would have to stand up that functionality or buy it in. So that is something that we look for. It's a longer term decision, because if we have more land, it's not necessarily a key activity of council.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, look, I agree a little bit with that, and we had a discussion with Holdco last week, didn't we, where, they were reflecting on what's their purpose, and if they're simply purely just holding, my view would be there's probably capacity for them through a subsidy or something to do a function like this without creating a completely separate CCO. Largely what, they're looking like they're going to be doing is very...
Any other comment on that? No? Okay.
So council's portfolio is made up of endowment land and buildings, which is 20 Don Street is in that space. Strategic land and buildings, which are Grace Street and Ness Street, where we have land which doesn't have an investment return. And then we have commercial trading land and buildings, which includes 20 Space Street and quite a few parcels of land on Bond and Mersey Streets. And we still currently have a couple of vacant parcels of land which have not been disposed of yet within the current LTP. We're meeting our KPIs, and I'll just move across to that, which is, those are our performance measures there. Potentially considering removing occupancy levels, because occupancy levels is not really, it's not an investment. It doesn't reflect what we're trying to achieve. Investment is to achieve return to council. So the only thing that has occupancy on it is in regards to 20 Don Street and 20 Space Street. And so potentially we will remove those from the activity plan. Also, just on the previous slide, the portfolio supports economic development objectives that we have within council. And that's me.
To add in there, one of those KPIs is around the return higher than the planned cash rate. It's got 3.5% because that's what it is at present. That will get updated once we understand what we think the cash rates will do for over the LTP period, once we've got that assumption.
Patricia, could you perhaps give me some idea of why the portfolio would be transferred to a CCO and not managed the way it is now?
It's looking at whether a better return could be obtained by having specialist commercial property managers running it, rather than the property team do a great job, but they've got commercial, they've got elderly housing, they've got property leases. It's a varied portfolio that if you had someone specifically managing, and then there's more time that can be spent.
So it's not a capacity thing?
No.
No. Thank you. Right, I think that's it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Heather. We're ahead. Trudy.
So this relates to our sister city relationships, and also when we have visiting dignitaries that come to council from across the world. So currently we support this within the governance team, and work with councillors to decide on if there are external visits or visits that are coming, and how we coordinate those with our sister cities. So the budget has recently been restored, as Michael has said. Council has resolved to travel to in the next term, and then we're expecting a return visit from Kumagaya, and then one from Suchen, which is likely in the financial year of 28-29. And it's likely to continue to host visits from friendship groups and schools, visits from Kumagaya, and then other diplomats from a case-by-case basis. How we measure that is essentially relationships are maintained and at least one visit per long-term plan cycle, so every 3 years. So this is what the proposed measurement would be.
Sorry.
Thanks. Around that, we've talked about these sister city relationships and visits in council, and I think that there was a strong feeling around the table that there should have been some kind of KPIs or measurements against what we would hope that any of those visits would aim to achieve. So why could we not have something like that developed and then measure against that? Because I feel that measuring whether or not you take a trip is maybe not a great determinant of success of that activity.
I will pass that feedback on to Mr Michael Morris for him to resolve.
And Trudy, is it clear that there's one visit to each of the sister cities within the term? Is that what the KPI says? Or is it just one visit? You don't know?
It's at least one visit per cycle. So it's just saying that. It doesn't say whether they're coming or...
Yep. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, so through you, Chair. I mean, with greatest respect to Andrea, it's a good example of a simple question which ends up costing staff a huge amount of work potentially. I mean, how would you, let's suppose you go to Kumagaya, and as a consequence of that, that sparks then, you know, tourists to visit from Kumagaya, or it sparks school visits and so forth. How do you put a value on that? How would you even know that a tourist came from Kumagaya? It's unbelievably difficult. Well, it sounds like a good idea to try to actually measure the financial contribution that you get as a consequence of that. I don't even know how you'd begin to do it, and you could end up costing actually more to try to measure it than the cost of actually doing it in the first place. So I understand why you're asking the question, but I just don't know how staff would even start to do that. And if you got consultants to do it for you, let's suppose we get consultants to measure the value of the relationship with Kumagaya, it'd probably cost us sort of 5 years worth of Kumagaya visits just to pay the consultant. So, look, I just think we have to be very careful with that sort of thing, that when we ask for something, it actually ends up driving a lot of cost.
And perhaps it could also be a way of measuring it, not measuring it, but taking account on the way through anything that comes as a result of it, like it might be retrospective. I'm not sure, but I understand what you're saying. Councillor Bond.
It's interesting because I totally support the query that Councillor De Vries is asking for. It's asking for us to be measurable with ensuring that our sister city relationships are having some sort of buyback into this city, more than just rugby people exchanging. You know, if we are a city for business and originally how Kumagaya relationship came about, I think there are, and as you said, me, you know, there are ways that we can look at how there is a targeted outcome. Our businesses do it every day. Are we saying that we're not going to do it because it's too hard?
So to a degree, it's subjective and slow burn in many cases. I mean, there's 40-odd students visiting Invercargill right now. How do you put a dollar value against that? I'll use, though, and the Kumagaya relationship was established first of all through schools, not business. I'll use Suchien as an example. We've got a couple of significant Chinese-owned businesses in Invercargill City, and when they're looking for places across the country to set up, the fact that you have a sister city relationship with a city in China, whether it's where that company is based or not, because it all goes through Chinese central government, is significantly important. So again, if you're wanting to attract that offshore investment, that's another reason that sits behind, but it's a slow burn.
Yeah, I just think it's about, you know, the purpose of the visits, and, you know, maybe we just need to define that more, because that would enable measurement if that's what you want to do. But, you know, it probably makes it clearer to the public around why we do these things. You know, probably not many of the members of the public would know how many students from Kumagoa come to the city every year, as just one example, and what's the benefit of that in many different forms. So I think it's just the purpose of it, and we need to define that clearly.
It may even be able to be done through through SIT. They may be able to keep a track of as part of their survey or their introductory information they get.
Don't go through SIT.
Yeah.
Sorry?
They don't go through SIT. Chinese students may do.
Yeah, but some of them are currently looking at that. Well, whatever. Patricia?
The comment was just raised before about businesses can measure it. I agree totally. Some businesses will measure these things, but often they are not audited on the measure, which is the challenge that we have as local government, where the auditors will audit the measure and our performance against it. So we have to be very crisp about any results that we have against a measure. So if we were to say it was X dollars of additional growth to the city, we'd have to measure it. And we wouldn't be able to measure it without the use of a consultant, because it's economic growth and it's particularly difficult to measure. So that's why staff do lean to measures that are easier to measure and easier to get through audit. Those that are on risk and assurance will go through the pain and the challenge that it is when audit goes through from one line to the next, through the annual report, when they disagree with how we have measured something and potentially qualify us because they disagree with a measurement. So that's the restriction that a normal business wouldn't have, because they would be able to make those assumptions that local government does.
Councillor Bond.
Thank you, Patricia, for that. That continues to somewhat make me feel quite uneasy. You know, we know that these sister city visits are contentious out in the public arena, but simply to bypass an audit to make it an easy, I mean, I'm not saying that's what you're directing to make it an easy target that we must visit at least once a year. Once a term, sorry. It makes me somewhat feel uneasy that to go through under the radar to make that target soft as a measure. It makes me a bit concerned, but I realise it's the ease of the audit. But yeah, is it right?
It also reflects the cost of measurement as well.
I was just going to say, it's that balance, isn't it? It's between, as Mayor Tom said, we can put something in place, but at what cost? Mayor, have you got other comments?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to add one thing. I mean, look, I don't think, as I said before, you're ever going to be able to measure in dollar terms the benefits, but neither should you. We are not in a sister city agreements for that purpose. If you look at the purpose of sister cities, the sister city movement was established to promote peace, cultural understanding through direct person-to-person citizen diplomacy. If you look up sister cities, that's what they're there for. They're not there actually for us to, count the dollars, benefit from how many tourists and kind of. That's not actually the purpose. And if we don't believe that that's a good enough reason to have them, if we don't believe that promoting peace, cultural understanding, and direct person-to-person citizen diplomacy is a good enough reason to have them, then we should stop doing it. And I think we got to. When people ask us what the value is, we've got to stop trying to quote things like we've got a rugby player who's came across, or we've got, that's what we should be talking about. That's actually the reason for it. Friendship, cultural understanding and so forth between ourselves and Japan, which is one of the biggest trading partners. In fact, back in the 1990s, it probably was the biggest one. And the same thing with China, which is our biggest trading partner, and particularly for Southland, actually. So that's the reason that we do it. We don't do it so we can count the dollars on, individual basis.
Can I just respond? Because I feel like there's misrepresentation, sorry, Mayor Tom, because I didn't ask about the financial metrics that should be measured. I'm asking if measuring one trip, one visit per cycle
and what other measurements or metrics we could be looking at. And we've seen throughout this morning in the workshops that there's been a real range of different things that are measured that are not purely financial. So I just felt that your comments are directed at me to correct a statement that I didn't intend to make around how we measure the financial contribution of Kumagai Sister City trips. And I don't necessarily disagree with you, because I think if we can't identify what the long-term benefit is, and we are not able to say, to clearly identify that to our community, then we need to have a really big discussion about the value of this going forward. And that would disappoint me. I think that there is value, and I think because it's hard to measure, that just because it's hard to measure, we shouldn't necessarily stop it. But we do need to have a goal and understand what we're working towards. And for me, it's not simply measuring by how many trips you take or how many visitors come here, how many trips come here.
Thanks for that clarification. Any further comments about Sister City visits or involvement? All right, thank you, Trudy. So that wraps up. Do you want to...
So that wraps up the public session today. So we'll leave the live stream there